Hi, I'm Fanny Nicholls. I would like you to know a little bit about my life. I was born in 1799, at St. Columb, Minor Cornwall to James and Ann Nicholls. I married John Trebilcock on January 2, 1823, at St. Columb, Minor Parish Church. John was born in 1791, at Hendra Farm in Cornwall. We had 11 children, 6 girls and 5 boys, all of them reaching adulthood except sadly our second girl passed away aged 8. Also our daughter Mary, who married Walter Tregellas, and had gone to South Australia, passed away aged 21 in South Australia. John was a good farmer, and I ran the household well, so the farm prospered and we were well off. We employed 9 or 10 servants in the house and on the farm. Wages were meager, 1 shilling a week, but servants were well fed, seemed content enough, and were loyal to us. On Sundays there was always a cold dinner as everyone went to church, the family packed into a carriage with the 2 eldest boys riding alongside, while the servants followed in a sturdy cart. There was an overseer called Nicholls to superintend the farm workers, blacksmiths, carpenters and laborers. When it was harvest time casual laborers were employed, apples put in stocks in the orchard for winter use, and in the house cider and perry were made, as well as jams and pickles. So it was a busy cheery place, ideal for a large growing family. Then John developed TB. In those days it was called inflammation of the lungs, and died on the 11th of March 1843, aged 51 years, and was buried in the Colan Church Cemetery, with our daughter Matilda. After John's death, I was thrown into confusion, without his strong arm to lean on. Our sons were growing up, but I couldn't trust them to run the place. My daughter Tilly's health after the shock of her father's death wasn't too good, and I was afraid of TB. With all these worries on my mind I finally married Nicholls on January 13, 1848. The marriage turned out to be a great mistake. Bose had proved himself a good overseer under a firm master, but it wasn't long before I found my mistake. He drank and gambled and finally sold the greatest asset, and pride of the farm, the well-bred stallion. He came home drunk and fell asleep with the £15 from the sale in his pocket. Tilly plucked it out and gave it to me, but it was the last straw, so I decided something must be done. Some members of the family had gone to Australia, and were doing very well, so I sent my eldest son John off to spy out the land and report. In the meantime Bose had decamped and no one knew where he was. John was very enthusiastic about all he had seen, and recommended Victoria, so immense preparations were made. Boxes were made on the place by the carpenter, clothes made, and provisions and household utensils to be used on the voyage packed, while John went to Plymouth and booked passage for the family on the Statesman, with Captain Trivett as master. By the time all was ready news came that gold had been discovered at Ballarat, news that fired the imagination, and drew all sorts and conditions of men to seek their fortune. We showed prudence in the choice of the Statesman, a sound ship, well provisioned by an excellent master. Tilly became a favourite of his, and was often invited onto the bridge for a breath of fresh air. He was popular with the passengers who presented him with a gold watch in gratitude for their safe arrival. Of course there was the usual rather primitive accommodation, passengers being expected to provide their own crockery, and to use their own boxes, and trunks for seating and the storage of clothes. Ship's food was also monotonous, and had to be supplemented from the family's own stores. The following article is from the Argus newspaper, Tuesday, December 5, 1854. To Captain J. F. Trivett, commander of the ship Statesman. Sir, we, the undersigned being the committee appointed by our fellow passengers on board the Statesman commanded by you, desire to express our heartfelt thanks to you for your kindness towards us, and appreciation of your conduct as a commander. Having committed our persons and property into your hands, we cannot but feel grateful when we consider with what care and solitude you have watched over our safety, preparing as far as was consistent with dispatch, to meet every danger to which travelers on the watery element are liable. Since our sailing from London on August 21, 1854, until now that we have arrived at the port of our destination, notwithstanding that we had to endure many inconveniences from the bad arrangements and overcrowding of the vessel, we enjoyed much comfort and pleasure, for which, to a great extent, we are indebted to you in giving us liberty to go all over the vessel without the least restraint, and promoting that good feeling and hilarity amongst us, which you have encouraged even by your own example. Our spiritual necessities also have not been overlooked by you, so that by your constant ministration to us on Sundays, we have not been entirely deprived of these privileges, which we valued so much on land. We wish likewise to acknowledge the services of those officers appointed under you to superintend the vessel in attending to our wants, and aiding you in rendering the voyage pleasant and successful. Admiring then your conduct as commander, our desire is that you may be useful in bringing yet many to the land that is destined, we hope, to become the happy home of thousands, or our fellow countrymen. Signed by David Evans, Chairman, and the whole of the passengers, in number 301. And now Captain Trivett's reply. Mr. David Evans and gentlemen, in acknowledging the receipt of your very flattering testimonial, allow me to express my sincere thanks. In endeavoring to promote your comfort as far as lay in my power, I was only acting in the path of duty, but it is not the less gratifying to my feelings to know my endeavors have been appreciated. May each of you with your families find all the happiness in this your adopted land you can desire. Your friend and well-wisher. Signed, J. F. Trivett. Ship Statesman, Hobson's Bay, November 24, 1854. When we landed at Sandridge, Port Melbourne, we found the whole colony shrouded in smoke. It took some time for the colonists to realize that during summer Victoria was a tinder box, and that they had to be careful to put out their campfires. Everyone spent the night on the beach, afraid to sleep in case the sea rushed in and swamped them, as they were used to the high Cornish cliffs and huge tides. Next day the men lost no time in going into town for necessities, the buying of wagons, bullocks, tents, etc., and finally we were all on the way to Ballarat. The road was shocking with great holes where a wagon wheel could almost sink out of sight. Sometimes they could not be avoided, so that the wagon had to be unloaded and manhandled out again. One day we had to stop beside the road as the red coats galloped by on their way back to Melbourne from the Eureka riots. 3 days later, we arrived in Ballarat to find a plain of hundreds of tents with holes dug everywhere. We made camp at Black Hill, where we were assumed to be very prosperous with our 2 big tents, though they were necessary with such a large family. Conditions were primitive and hard on the gold fields, especially during the bleak winters. The boys, Richard and Adam, took out miners' rights, and the talk was all of gold. They dug their own small hole and found a sprinkling of gold a few feet down. Also inevitably their claim was jumped by 2 eager beaver miners. The boys were running home in dismay when a friendly giant nicknamed Wee Gordy came to their rescue, and pulled the miners away by the scruff of the neck, and sent them packing. I passed away on November 1, 1892, aged 93, at Leopold in Victoria, and was buried in the Geelong Eastern Cemetery. The following article was in the Geelong Advertiser, Friday, November 4, 1892. The great respect entertained for the late Mrs. Trebilcock of Leopold, and her son Richard Trebilcock, and family was fully shown yesterday, by the attendance of a large number of persons to take part in the deceased lady's funeral. The cortege left Mr. Trebilcock's house at Leopold shortly after noon and consisted of a hearse, 2 mourning coaches, and over 20 vehicles containing the principal residents of the district, and a great many friends from town. The remains, which were encased in a coffin of polished oak, were interred in the Church of England portion of the Eastern Cemetery. The deceased had reached the ripe age of 93 years last September. She arrived in the colony in 1854, and with her family resided in the Ballarat district for a great number of years, securing the love and esteem of a large circle of friends. I'm glad I could share my story with you. I hope you found this interesting. That's it for now.